Some gamers aren't like other people. Some of them love their favorite games so much that they start getting crazy ideas in their head. They concoct wild theories about what's happening in these games. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is that they start to see the truth. We're talking about the wildest theories gamers have come up with to explain their favorite games. Some of these theories seem more likely than others, but they're all fun to explore. Be sure to let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notify button, the little bell there, so you can stay on top of all the latest content from the gamer. That Braid is about the making of the atom bomb. If you've played Jonathan Blow's video games or seen his interviews, you know he's a deep thinker. But what if his first game isn't about what it seems to be about at all? Blow's first game was Braid, a platformer that has you manipulate time to solve environmental puzzles. Between its many head-scratching levels, you'll find notes that tell the game's story. You're Tim, a young man who's trying to rescue a princess from a monster. As you read these notes, level after level, they become much more strange, using what seems like dream logic to connect one to the next. Most gamers had no idea of what to make of these text entries, but some forum members have concocted what seems like a plausible explanation. Basically, the game is about the making of the atom bomb. Tim is a scientist working on the Manhattan Project, and the game is a dream world he whipped up to deal with his role in the death and misery that those bombs caused. The last set of messages in the game do seem to line up with this theory. One says it was as though the earth had opened and the skies split. Another hints at a mushroom cloud saying, she stood tall and majestic. She radiated fury. What do you think? Squall is dead in Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy is one of the most popular series of RPGs on the planet. It also has some of the weirdest plot twists you'll find in any kind of fiction. Take Final Fantasy VIII, a game that stars a main character who seems to be alive throughout the entire game, but just might be dead through most of it. Why? Because of something that happens to Squall at the end of Disc 1. Squall and his buddies find themselves fighting a villain named Edea. I don't know, that's what I called her. When she suddenly summons an ice shard and hurls it through Squall's chest, he falls off a platform and slowly closes his eyes. Surely he's dead, right? Apparently not. The game continues on Disc 2, with Squall waking up in a cell, wondering why he doesn't have a wound from the attack. If this theory is true, Squall died from his injuries, and the rest of the game consists of his visions as his life flutters away. After all, a chunk of ice piercing through your body would surely leave a mark, right? And no one even mentions it once he reunites with his party. That there's a timeline to the Zelda games. The Legend of Zelda is a long-running series that has made up well over a dozen games. Some of the installments are directly related to one another, but most of them seem unlinked. That pun was very much intended. They're just different takes on the idea of a boy clad in green fighting a powerful enemy, often named Ganon. The game worlds and even the art styles vary widely, but fans won't stop trying to tie them all together. For these people, all Zelda games take place in the same universe, just at different times. To say it gets complicated is an understatement, especially considering that Link can time travel in some of the games. A number of websites have tried to make sense of how every single game could fit together, but none of them are entirely convincing. Nintendo actually published an official Zelda timeline in an art book, but it only contains 9 of the games, leaving the rest for fans to debate. When you get down to it, Nintendo probably never intended for the games to exist in a single timeline or universe. The only way you can cram them together is by retconning, which is nerd speak for changing the past so it lines up with the present. Maybe we'd be better off leaving these games alone. AERIS wasn't originally supposed to die in Final Fantasy VII. If you played Final Fantasy VII in the decades since it released, then there's a good chance you shed a tear when Sephiroth killed the innocent flower girl AERIS with his enormous sword. What you might not know is the theory that AERIS wasn't always supposed to die in the game. It's possible the developers came up with the idea later and went back to put it in. For one thing, the vast majority of players will never earn AERIS' 4th limit break move before she dies. To do so requires a whole lot of grinding early in the game. Why'd they bother giving her a 4th limit break if most players will never get it? Also, at the end of the game, you have to split your characters into 3 parties. If you found the 2 hidden characters, Vincent and Yuffie, one of your parties is stuck with 2 characters instead of 3. If AERIS had lived, the party would be full. Granted, this isn't the most convincing of arguments, but considering how much fans love AERIS, it's no surprise that they're looking for ways she might have lived. You're a bad person in Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon Red and Blue were the games that made Pokemon a household name. One of the simplest role-playing games around, it helped introduce a whole generation of gamers to the genre, and everyone who played it knew the hero as a good-hearted kid who does no wrong. Well, not according to this theory. Your main rival in the game is a character named Gary Oak. He always seemed to be just one step ahead of you on your journey, and every time you met, you have your Pokemon battle his. Gary tends to use the same Pokemon each time you fight, including a Rattata that eventually evolves into a Raticate. But after you battle against him on a boat, you never see that Raticate again. What happened to Gary's Raticate? According to this theory, it died as a result of the battle on the boat. The very next time you meet Gary is in Lavender Town at the Pokemon Tower, a building that houses an enormous graveyard for Pokemon. Why is Gary there? Isn't it possible he's there to bury the Raticate you killed? It's dark stuff for a kid's game, but maybe that's why they left it open to interpretation. Metal Gear Solid 3 is a VR simulation. To play a Metal Gear Solid game is to come to terms with just how bizarre a spy story can get. These games have everything from enormous robots to accelerated aging to obese bosses on roller skates. They also contain VR missions to help players train in the ways of tactical espionage. So it wouldn't be a huge surprise if one of the series' main installments was a simulation. That's what this theory says about Metal Gear Solid 3, a prequel that seems to take place in the 1960s and stars Big Boss instead of Solid Snake. If this theory holds water, Metal Gear Solid 3 actually takes place after Metal Gear Solid 2. And while it seems like Big Boss takes center stage, it could actually be Solid Snake playing the whole thing in a VR simulation. Illuminati confirmed. After all, when talking about the virtuous mission at the beginning of the game, Big Boss mishears it as the virtual mission. Also, if you kill Revolver Ocelot, the game dissolves into a screen that says Time Paradox. Maybe it isn't the video game saying that. Maybe it's the VR simulation within the game. In a series known for bizarre plot twists, Metal Gear Solid 3 being a simulation probably wouldn't surprise anybody. Commander Shepard was indoctrinated by the Reapers. Before developer BioWare went and redid the ending of Mass Effect 3 because of widespread complaints, hopeful fans had figured out a possible reason the original ending was so dang bad. Fans were mad at the ending because it largely discarded player choice, something the entire series had been based on leading up to it. You could play these games however you wanted, whether that meant being a ruthless renegade commander, being a concerned leader, or playing it somewhere in between. But at the end of the trilogy, the game gave you 3 choices, and the only main difference between them was the color of an explosion. No matter how you had played leading up to it, your ending was basically the same as everyone else's. According to this theory, the ending didn't really matter. That's because somewhere along the line, Commander Shepard had been indoctrinated by the Reapers. Much of what happened after that was actually a hallucination in Shepard's mind. In fact, if the so-called indoctrination theory is true, much of the series may have all been an illusion. And if it was, when the ending came, the Reapers only gave Shepard options that would help them. Kinda trippy, isn't it? Donkey Kong Country is anti-American propaganda. Have you played the Super Nintendo classic Donkey Kong Country? If you haven't, you should. It's a beloved platformer that stars a gorilla trying to get his sizable banana stash back from bandit crocodiles. It also has some of the best graphics you could cram onto an SNES game cartridge in 1994. But what if it was trying to brainwash you into thinking the US was a very bad place? Well, that's one theory anyway. According to people who believe it, the game is a metaphor for the Banana Wars, in which the US intervened with Caribbean nations to get a leg up economically, particularly in the banana business. In this reading of the game, Donkey Kong represents the besieged nations, and the villainous King K. Rool is America, coming in essentially to secure its banana trade. After all, the president at the time was Teddy Roosevelt, which kind of sounds like King K. Rool Roosevelt. Well, this one's probably a stretch, especially considering it was made many generations after the Banana Wars. But whether you believe it or not, you can see how the theory came together. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is about the 5 stages of grief. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is a truly strange Zelda game. It's set up differently than the rest, with a giant human-faced moon set to crash into the planet unless Link can stop it in time. It's so weird that it could all be a dream, which it basically is if you agree with this theory. At the beginning of the game, you get knocked out by this little creature called the Skull Kid. If this theory is correct, the blow knocks you into a coma, and the entire game is a dream that stems from your grief over the planet's imminent destruction. The first stage of grief is denial, which lines up with the first town you encounter. Its citizens don't believe that the moon is on a crash course with the planet. The next town you come to involves a king who's angry about his kidnapped daughter. Anger is the second stage of grief. These encounters continue until every last stage of grief is crossed off. It's likely that this is just a coincidence, but it's also possible the folks at Nintendo decided to make a seriously gloomy game about grief. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a stage play. Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the most important platformer games of all time. When it debuted in America in 1990, it blew the minds of NES owners across the land. It's that good. But what if none of it was real? Of course it's a video game, so none of it is actually real, but we expect that our games take themselves seriously and depict a certain kind of reality. According to this theory, though, the entire game of Super Mario Bros. 3 is a stage play. Think about it. The title screen begins with a curtain opening. Many items in the environment have shadows as if lights are shining on them, casting shadows on the backdrop. Even the platforms look like they're held in place with ropes or bolts. Believe it or not, kids, series creator Shigeru Miyamoto seemed to confirm this rumor in a Twitter video. When someone asked if the game was all a performance, he nodded. Does that make it canon? It just might. So what do you think of our picks for crazy video game theories that will blow your mind? We hope you enjoyed the video, so let us hear your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our great video content in the future.